Discovery, Conquest, and Colonization Acrostic by Charimar Berrios, Fernando Delgado, and Laura Mercado. Discovery Acrostic.
Discovery was on the horizon the moment Columbus and his men set out for exploration. With the help of his 105 men and 3 caravels, he stumbled upon the Bahamas. Instantly after finding the islands, he claimed the land for Spain and named it San Salvador. Later in the trip, one of his ships, the Santa Maria, was destroyed. Scraps of the ship were used to build the first Spanish settlement in the West Indies. The fort was called La Navidad. Columbus was given a hero's welcome when he returned to Spain. They celebrated for a week, and the monarchs told him to ready himself for a second trip. Over in Portugal, King John was upset because he did not have a rightful claim over the islands discovered by Columbus. To resolve the dispute, the demarcation line was created. Voyage plans were made, and Columbus set out for a second trip. Upon reaching Guadalupe, he came across some Taínos, whom he took back to their homeland Boriquen. Embarking on this trip to Boriquen led to the discovery of present-day Puerto Rico. Though he claimed it for Spain, it was ignored for 15 years. Then he went back to Hispaniola. Ruined, La Navidad was rebuilt into a fort known as Isabela. The fort was named as such in honor of the Queen of Spain. Years passed and Columbus was back in Spain preparing for his third voyage. The settlers in Hispaniola revolted, which led to the investigation of the case that prompted the arrest of the Columbus brothers. Ultimately, Nicolás de Obando was left in charge of the settlement, and Columbus died without any rights over the lands he discovered. But that didn't stop the settlers from trying to get their way on the island, trying to control all the natives.
Conquest Acrostic. Caribbean inhabitants were exploited by the Spanish settlers. They were forced into a disguised form of slavery. Other than the obvious tasks slaves must carry out, they were also required to adopt Spanish culture. This includes learning Spanish and converting to Catholicism. Natives were protected by the crown. They were also paid for their services. Quickly, they accomplished their goals for expansion and spread of religion, to have more control over the natives, protect the economy, avoid foreign intervention, and keep the encomenderos from becoming powerful enough to challenge the crown. The decrees of 1503 and 1504 were passed. Unfortunately, the decrees were selectively enforced. This means that any and all privileges the natives had according to the decrees were completely taken from them, to benefit the settlers. Eventually, a friar named Antonio de Montesinos spoke up for the natives and against the abuse they faced. He accused his parishioners of not complying with the Christian obligations. Suddenly, Diego Columbus intervened. The dispute ended with the creation of the Law of Burgos. These laws were an adaptation of the previously established edicts, but further tightened the grip Spaniards had on the natives. This set of laws would eventually lead to yet another man speaking up for the Taínos. And Acrostic. Aware of the situation, Bartolomé de las Casas demanded that justice be done for the natives in the name of Christianity. However, his argument did not prove to be so convincing. Not moved by Bartolomé's argument, jurist Palacios Rubios implemented the requerimientos, giving the Spaniards even more control over the natives. This was in part caused by Ponce de León's arrival in Puerto Rico and exploration colonization of the island. Determined to expand his territory and riches, he explored the island. Upon finding the port of present-day San Juan, he named it Puerto Rico, due to the many riches the island possessed. Little did Ponce de León know that because Diego Columbus had been trying to get his family's rights over the West Indies back, and that the crown had obliged, Columbus would do his best to replace the existing officers in the West Indies. Despite going against the crown, this included the removal of Juan Ponce de León's position in the government. Colonization Acrostic.
Cerrón replaced Ponce de León as governor of Puerto Rico and further oppressed the Taínos. Diego Columbus then established the settlement of San Germán to replace the Sotomayor settlement. On a mission to regain control of the region, Columbus appointed Mendoza as governor of Puerto Rico. Mendoza's rule led the Taínos to rebel. Later on, concerning Ponce de León's settlement of Caparra led to its relocation. The settlement was moved and later renamed San Juan, hence the island adoption of the name Puerto Rico. On the island resided 3 social groups: Spanish settlers, the Taínos, and African slaves. Part of the increase in population was due to the células de vecindad being extended to farmers and artisans. Next, A second increase in population was brought forth in the African portion of the population when the African royal policy was abandoned. This means that settlers finally adopted bozales, which were slaves directly from Africa, instead of only Latinos, Christianized Spanish-speaking slaves. It's true that they were supposed to work the mines, but they were exhausted. Slaves were domesticated and hired out as laborers in the sugar industry. From then on, slaves were used for these purposes. Zealous ways of thinking on Spaniards' part, they do anything to protect their riches, led to the fortification of the defense system, the Casablanca, La Fortaleza, El Morro Castle, El Boquerón, and Santa Elena. They wanted to be ready to deflect any and all foreign attacks. Aside from this, the first Catholic Church was introduced to Puerto Rico by Ponce de León. The first bishop in the West Indies was Alonso Manso. The first place in the world to have a Holy Inquisitor was Puerto Rico as well. Services and assistance, such as education for the young boys of the city, were offered by the Catholic Church. In an effort to make sure that they get their share of the profit made, the Crown appointed a treasurer, an accountant, a commissioner, and an overseer. Taxes were also established to increase the profit. Once the mines were exhausted, however, Puerto Rico experienced its first economic crisis. This led to the depopulation of the colony. People fled to places where they make more money. Needing help from the Crown to keep the population under control, Francisco Manuel de Lando requested that the Crown give the settlers incentives, so they be motivated to work and stay in Puerto Rico. Over time, they began to develop a sugar industry, rather than one based on mining. However, this economy stagnated due to the foreign attacks that forces the monarchy to focus on their defense instead of the economy.